All right, giving it a couple of minutes here to wait for people to enter. We're going to give it about 1 more minute. For those of you who are listening in, either here live or the recording, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And just still admitting a couple people as they come in. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and get started even as people keep entering. For those of you who are here, welcome. So glad that you're here. Thank you for being here. Feel free to keep your video off. You can keep yourself on mute. This will be mostly just a presentation for you to gather information. There will be a quick Q&A at the end as long as time allows. So I'm going to move through this content. If you have pen and paper, I do recommend it. Get your pen and paper out or your document on the web so that you can write some notes. All right. So getting started here. So the goal of this presentation today is to teach you the 3 steps that I took to end my over 8-year struggle with binge eating and just feeling completely out of control with food. To then now get to a place where now I have complete confidence and peace of mind with food and diet and my body. I trust myself to follow through on all of the promises that I make. So this event is perfect for you, and I'm so glad you're here. If you resonate with any of the following things, so maybe you try to eat healthy all day long, and then you still find yourself ending up cheating on whatever your plan was, or overeating maybe on the weekends or the holidays, or even just in the evenings after work. Or maybe you find that just certain foods you just cannot keep in the house, or you'll eat them all. But the problem is sometimes they just show up in your life anyway. Or maybe you're tired of going on short-term diets that just don't last. Maybe you are tired of feeling guilty every single time you want to just have some ice cream or a treat or eat out with friends or have a drink. Or maybe you're here because you just want to learn how to quickly end food obsession and binge eating and emotional eating, and do that without having to spend many, many hours and years in therapy, or giving up on your health and fitness goals, or just trying to use all of your willpower, which doesn't even work anyway, and it doesn't last. So if you resonate with any of those, then this event is perfect for you. You're in the right place. So to tell you a little bit about me, my name is Michelle, and I am a health and fitness coach. About 4.5 years ago, that's when I ended my own personal struggle with binge eating. And since then, I've been able to develop a process based on my own personal experience, my experience working with clients, with coaches for me, as well as just learning more and more about nutrition. And so now in the past year, I've been able to help over a dozen other men and women end decades or years of struggling with binge eating, overeating, emotional eating, or jumping on and off diets, or just obsessing about food and feeling bad about their bodies. And I'm able to help them go from that to having a healthy and positive relationship with food, exercise, and their bodies. And I've also helped dozens of men and women have breakthroughs in their health and fitness overall. Whether that's running the longest and farthest they've ever ran before, whether that's building up more muscle or strength, whether that's just learning how to fall in love with exercise and taking care of themselves, whether that's losing weight, if that was healthy for them, or just learning to actually love their bodies for the first time I've had people for the first time in literally their entire life. So that's a little about me, but it has not always been this way for me. Like I said, just a few years ago, I was in a very similar place to maybe some of you. So to give you sort of a backstory, my binge eating was at its very worst about 12 years ago. And it was a really frustrating time for me, particularly because that was also the time when I was trying my hardest to be as healthy as I could be. So maybe you relate to that. The more you try to be healthy, it's almost like it backfires. Um, and for me, I would start the day often with really good intentions. I would eat what I thought was really healthy and clean all day long. But then it usually was sometime around 4 or 5 p.m. It was like all of a sudden switch flipped and I turned into another person. It was like I became some sort of binge eating monster. And all I wanted to do was go home and eat. And so, again and again, at the end of the day, I'd find myself in my room alone, just eating bowls and bowls of oats, jars of peanut butter, bowls of ice cream, really whatever was available that I had actually left there for myself. Um, and I felt awful. I hated it. I hated being stuck in this cycle. So, how did I actually break that cycle? Well, first of all, I want to let you know that I actually hit what I call several rock bottom moments. And I tried many different solutions because of that. And let me just pause to say here that I actually believe now that rock bottom moments are overrated because I had so many that didn't make a difference. But what I want you to do is sort of listen in here and just see if your story isn't the same as mine, but if there's any similarities you can hear in moments that you've had that have maybe made you want to change, or solutions that you came up with that didn't end up working. So if you relate, I would love it if you share a little me in the comments, or if your video's on, nod your head, or just let me know if you're listening later on. So the first rock bottom moment I had was actually when I was a freshman in college, and I had gotten to the heaviest weight I'd ever been. I gained that typical freshman 15, and I was lying on the floor of my dorm room. And I had been using food to procrastinate on an essay that was due at midnight. And I was lying there trying to just cram finish this essay. And I remember hitting the send button on my email for that essay at 11:58 p.m., right before it was due. And then I had this big sigh and I looked around me, and all around me were these Pop-Tart wrappers, cinnamon Pop-Tart wrappers, just bunches of them. Because what I had done is I had just eaten to try to avoid having to finish this essay. So at that moment, I thought to myself, I feel sick to my stomach. I can't keep letting this go on. If this keeps going the same way for the next couple of years, I'm going to be sick. I might have severe problems with my gut and my health. I'm going to get heavier and heavier and weigh more and more, and I'm not okay with that. So in that moment, I decided I'm going to start running. I thought, okay, running's going to help me lose weight. And it did. It did do that. And I did start running consistently. But what it didn't do is it didn't help my binge eating. In fact, I would say it made it worse because I ran more and more and I was more and more hungry. I was more and more driven to eat. Okay, so that was rock bottom moment number one. Rock bottom moment number two came along a couple of years later. This was my junior year in college, and I was living with some roommates at the time. And I had thought earlier that day, okay, I'm going to stop binge eating today, as I frequently thought in the mornings. And I had thrown out a lot of the foods that I would normally binge on. or actually pretty much all of them. And then it came to that 4 or 5 p.m. moment that I typically turned into a binge monster. And I was like, nope, can't do this anymore. I got to eat. And so I was standing there in the kitchen and I was looking around and I didn't have any binge foods. So I reached into the cupboard and I pulled out this box of cereal that didn't belong to me. It belonged to my roommate. And I started eating out of that box. And in that moment, I was so ashamed and embarrassed. I thought to myself, what is wrong with me that I am stealing my roommate's cereal, like eating their food just to feed into this behavior? And so, another rock bottom moment for me. And I decided, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask my boyfriend at the time to hold me accountable. So I asked him to please watch me and make sure that I didn't overeat. Now, maybe you have a good guess of how this worked out, but it did not work out well. First of all, he wasn't even around all the time, so he couldn't watch everything. But also, I began to develop this habit of wanting to avoid people more and more. And I started hiding my eating and I started eating in secret. So this actually fed more into the behavior. So that one didn't work. Then there was another rock bottom moment for me. And actually, before I get into that one, I want to cover something. This whole time, I was really good at making up for what I ate. I was a long distance runner since I became one and started running. I was working out 6 to 7 days per week. I counted every single calorie I ate down to the amount of drop of oil in the pan. I fasted the next day after I binged so that I could make up for those calories. I remember I tried laxatives at one point, and I really tried to eat perfectly any moment I wasn't binge eating. And so, just so you know, it's like I tried making up for it, and I did make up for it, but that didn't negate the cost and the struggle of what binge eating did to my psyche and my health, my emotional health. Okay, so another rock bottom moment I had was when I actually asked my friend and colleague at the time if I could give her money every time I binge ate. And this, I don't remember, it might have worked for a moment, but it didn't work very long because eventually I ended up giving her hundreds of dollars. And I realized, well, this isn't working. I'm just losing a bunch of money. So I canceled that. Um, so yeah, it's like people can often say something like, you can't exercise away your diet. Well, I did, but there was a cost to that, right? There was a huge cost. I hated feeling out of control with food, even though that was secret and I kept it a secret. Um, I hated feeling like all I wanted to do was eat at the end of the day instead of go do other things like be with people and socialize and go out and do my homework and not procrastinate. And I hated how I used food to numb and procrastinate and avoid things that were uncomfortable. So, with all of these rock bottom moments, I want you to see a theme here. Each time I had this mega moment of shame, and I decided today is the day I'm going to make a change. And every time I came up with a tactic based on that idea, a new way to control myself and my behavior, a new way of dealing with the fact that something was wrong with me. It was always a commitment to being more disciplined or having somehow more willpower. So now, none of those things actually made the difference I wanted. So, what actually did? What finally turned this around for me? That's the next question, right? So, I have first a question for you. Any of you, do you know that are you the kind of person who would do way more for others than you would ever do for yourself? just kind of ponder that for a moment. If that's you, I can absolutely relate. That was me. Um, I should let you know, when I finally overcame binge eating, I was already a personal trainer. And I was great at helping people with their fitness, with their exercise. But when it came to nutrition, I always avoided that. I would not help my clients with food. And one day, my boss at the time, he asked me to please help the clients with nutrition. He said he wanted me to, train in nutrition, learn how to do that, and do it with clients. And I thought to myself, well, I cannot do that. I felt like a complete fraud. How can I help these people if I can't even help myself? And so in that moment, I decided, okay, I have to do something about this. Okay. And I decided I can't do it alone. I need help. Um, and so at the time, I decided I needed a coach, someone to hold me accountable. I knew I couldn't keep this a secret anymore. I knew I needed someone to hold me accountable. I knew it couldn't just be me. And so my initial reason was that someone to hold me accountable, and also someone to get me to be more disciplined, because I believed I lacked discipline. But now what I learned was it wasn't accountability or discipline that I needed, or at least that wasn't everything. So here is what my coach did that worked. It was very simple, actually. She used some common sense to help me see from a new perspective the things that I had been doing and believing and acting on that were actually creating the binge eating drive. She also taught me how the brain works, okay, how I could separate my conscious brain from my subconscious automatic brain and automatic decision making, that binge eating self. And the other part was she was there every step of the way. She was cheering me on, she was holding me accountable, and she was not making me feel ashamed. Okay, so as a result of working through that process with her, in 3 months, I stopped binge eating completely. And from then on, I never looked back. And it got better and better the more I learned. Since then, I've actually been able to understand even more about what caused the problem in the first place. And looking back over those past 4 years about what's worked and what hasn't, I've gotten to a place where, working with my clients, they're actually able to end binge eating in a matter of 2 to 8 weeks rather than 3 months. Now, I often work with people for, say, 3 months, because that way we're able to pursue even bigger goals and really make sure that, they're confident in their ability to sustain what they created. But the stopping binge eating starts really rapidly. And I'm going to share with you why that is. But the key is, or what I want you to know about me, is that once I ended that, I was able to do so many things that binge eating had prevented me from doing. Okay, so for example, I was able to start working on healing my gut and following some protocols offered by a professional, because now I had control over my eating. I didn't have to worry about eating off of the plan because I had that complete control. I was also able to start pursuing my career further because I was now so much more confident in my own ability to trust myself, not just in food, but in all of my promises to myself. And I also just gained so much confidence from overcoming binge eating. So I was able to start my own business and build my own coaching practice. And the last thing I want to share that was awesome that I created was I stopped procrastinating. I just don't procrastinate on things anymore. And so I think this is an amazing accomplishment, but I think it stemmed from overcoming the use of food as a procrastination tool. So lots of other things are available when binge eating is gone. For me, it's just the ability to just live my life more free in my headspace. At the end of the day, I can watch movies with my husband. I can read more and learn more because I like to study. I can improve my skills in my career as a coach. I've done other fun activities like rock climbing and getting out and with socially with people, paddleboarding, just calling up a friend, this kind of stuff that I used to avoid and just use food to get out of it. Okay, so that's enough about me. I have another question for you. What could you accomplish if food, exercise, diet, body image were no longer a problem for you? If that problem, if binge eating was just a thing of the past, what would you do? While you think about that, I'm going to have a sip of water. If you have a pen and paper, I really recommend writing some of this stuff down. All right, so getting into the agenda for today. The 3 things I'm going to share today in detail, the 3 steps, are in the end what made all of the difference for me, but also they're accumulated by what I learned even after I ended binge eating to make the process even faster. These are things that I wish I would have known when I was struggling with binge eating. And so if you can do these the right way, then you can save years, because it took me years. It can save you years of time struggling through programs, diets, books, struggling to use your willpower and then feeling worse about it. Okay. So before I give you those 3 teachings, I want to just give you one last thing that is really going to help you to get the most out of what I share. I want you to just try on a different way of thinking. So maybe you'll hear some things that you think, okay, I know this already. If you do, I want you to just try on a new way of thinking and ask, what can I learn from this? Because the truth is, even if you know this already, it doesn't really matter what we know. It matters what we actually have experienced and grasped and worked with in our lives. And if you've heard it already, but it's still not something that you do, well, there's still something you could learn. The second thing is, if you start to feel like or think, this won't work for me, then I want you to just try on a new question. How can this work for me? Because the truth is, there are so many different avenues to succeed in ending binge eating, in gaining health. The key is that you actually look for what in all of these things will work for you, because that's what's going to get you moving forward. Okay, so I invite you to try those on today. Now we'll go on to teaching number 1. All right, so teaching number 1, get out your pen and paper. The title is, There is Nothing Wrong with You. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not lacking discipline. You're not lacking willpower. I don't care how many people told you that. So I'll give you a little backstory on this. I felt like there was this monster in me and I had to fight it. I felt like I wanted to binge. I didn't want to, but I just felt totally out of control. So I felt like I lacked willpower or discipline. But the truth is, there was part of me that wanted to stop and then part of me that didn't. And they were fighting each other. And fighting each other doesn't work. We have to learn to work with the both sides of us. So I have a question for you to illustrate this a little bit. What is the first thing that you want to do tonight? If I tell you, starting tomorrow, you cannot never eat any more ice cream. Usually, the thought is something along the lines of, I'm going to eat a heck of a lot of ice cream tonight before it's all gone the rest of my life. So that's just an example of how Fighting against yourself is not working. Okay, so here's another way to illustrate for you how this works in your brain. What is the first thing you think about when I tell you, don't think about a purple elephant? Don't you see a purple elephant in front of you right now? Yeah, because your brain's not following the don't, it just automatically images or imagines what I asked. So your brain is just doing exactly what it's built to do. There's nothing wrong with it. And my coach taught me to stop trying to fight with and reason with that side of me that felt out of control and wanted to binge, and actually seek starting to understand it. So she helped me understand all the different thoughts, beliefs, things going on in my own head, and differentiate those from the real me, the person I wanted to be. And this was incredibly empowering because once I understood why I was doing what I was doing, I brought awareness to that. It became so much easier to let go of those things by choice, with ease, with even kindness, grace, and joy, instead of feeling like I had to fight it. So, again, the teaching here is it's not just about willpower. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to try harder. What you need to do is start to try to understand yourself and what is driving you to do what you're doing and how you're creating this problem for yourself. So here are some questions to kind of help you start to get at this. And you can write them down and journal on them later or think about them now. Why do I want to binge eat? What's fueling this drive to overeat inside of me? How am I actually creating this drive? Why do I eat the way I eat? So I'm gonna give you an example of one thing that my coach helped me see. I was trying to control my eating so tightly and make it so perfect and cut out calories so constantly that those things drove my body and my mind to want to fight against that and eat. The more I tried to stop myself from binge eating, the more I wanted it. Just like the example of ice cream and how you want it. It's like that Last Supper mentality, even more if you say you can never have it again. So besides just me, I want to illustrate this with an example from a real life example from one of my clients. So I'm gonna not use her name and just call her Suzanne. Okay, so Suzanne had been in and out of decades of dieting. Literally since she was a child, weight loss was pretty much the biggest struggle of her life. And of course, then over time, binge eating also became a problem. And for her, she said she had this continuous pattern. And that pattern was she would eat really well, get on some sort of diet or plan, and she would usually lose 10 to 20 pounds. But when she hit that specific mark, all of a sudden she wanted to binge and she'd end up getting off the plan and gaining it all back. So when we dug into this a little bit to try to understand better why that was happening, we realized what she was thinking when she got to that goal, that 10 to 20 pounds. She would think, quote, I've reached my goal. Now I deserve a break. Guys, if you need a break, you haven't created a process that will last. So Suzanne was always following a plan with this idea that she was acting like she was not going to keep it up long term. She would set herself up with plans she didn't want to keep doing. She might not even wanted to do it in the first place. They didn't work for her and her life. So What I started doing with her is helping her work through and brainstorm and create choices with food that she actually enjoyed. And in about 2 weeks, she stopped binge eating entirely without having to fight herself or use any willpower. She started creating a healthy lifestyle on her own terms that she really legitimately loved and enjoyed. And a few weeks later, she started doing the same thing with workouts. She started working out more consistently than she ever had, in ways that she found fun and that she just wanted to do. So now, later, I've checked in with her a few different times, months later, and she's doing the same thing. She's keeping it up. It's feeling awesome. She even started to bring some friends on board to do it with her. Okay, so another example from a different client. Her name is Karen, and she was a runner and a lawyer. She was a mom of two, and she was actually a very fit and active person. She was very disciplined, as you can imagine, um, and very responsible. And when she came to me, she was telling me, "Oh my God, I'm so out of control. I just need someone to hold me accountable." Because what had happened was she had gone for 3 years eating what she considered perfectly on this plan with this fitness trainer she was working with. And then for some reason or whatever, at that 3 year mark, she just started to be like, screw it, I don't want to do this anymore. And she started eating bags and bags of chips at night. She started drinking more, eating cake more often. In fact, she got to the point where she wouldn't want to go to birthday parties because she was so afraid that she would eat all of the cake. So when we started talking together, I helped her realize that it wasn't an accountability issue here. It was a way that she was actually doing the diet she had been doing before in the first place. It was a mindset, a way of thinking problem. And trying to control herself and have tons of accountability was part of the problem. So what we started doing is we actually started getting rid of a bunch of these like rules and restrictions in the previous diet that she'd had that really were unnecessary. And she started developing a way similar to the other client where she would create her own diet on her own terms. She used a little bit of the stuff that did work from the previous program, but her own stuff too, like allowing herself a drink every so often of wine with friends or having a slice of cake. Okay. And in about 4 weeks, she was no longer eating bags of chips at night. In fact, she had found a healthy snack that she loved. Um, and she was also able to go to birthday parties and eat one slice of cake and not worry about eating more. In about 12 weeks, she started actually losing some weight without doing any dieting. And what I think is the absolute best part is she started loving her body for the first time, she said, in her life. All right, so that's teaching number one. We're going to go on to number two. I'm just going to take a sip of water. Again, I hope you're taking notes. All right, teaching number two. Self-trust can be learned. Self-trust can be learned. Let me tell you, since I was a kid, I remember feeling like certain things I struggled with, or when I was a kid, I felt like things I struggled with, I was just born with that problem. Like I was always going to be quiet or shy or a procrastinator or slow at making decisions. These are just stories I had about myself. And fortunately, as I grew older, I had some mentors, some adults in my life who taught me something different. They taught me that I didn't have to keep living those stories. I could actually overcome some of those problems. I didn't have to change everything about myself, but I could. I could change as much as I wanted to. And so one by one, I actually started to change some of those things. So, for example, I was incredibly quiet. I was so quiet that constantly, I remember in classes, teachers would always be like, Michelle, speak up, we can't hear you. And then I would end up trying 5 times and never being loud enough. So, when I became a personal trainer and coach in fitness, what I realized is I wasn't going to get by if I was quiet because my clients wouldn't be able to hear me and when I was coaching them. So, with the help of a mentor and friend, I was able to start working on that intentionally, building the power of my own voice. And it was the most beautiful thing when I found my own voice and I became loud enough to be heard all the way across the room. So that's just one example. Another one was procrastination. Um, I was able to overcome that when, again, it was something where I realized procrastination isn't working for me. It's costing me a lot of opportunities in my life. And so I actually intentionally started working on that little step by little. I started making promises that I could really know that I could keep and timelines and deadlines that were easy to meet. And then I eventually grew those and started making bigger commitments. And eventually, my sense that I needed to procrastinate or that I would procrastinate just disappeared. So, again, many other things I was able to overcome. But what these things taught me is that anything can be learned. And so I had this in my favor, and I want it to be in your favor too, this belief, because people will tell you that you have to manage your triggers the rest of your life, your food triggers, your binge eating triggers, because you have this propensity towards binge eating or disordered eating. And I think this is a load of BS and it's not helpful. When I struggled with my control around food, what I knew deep down is that all I needed to do was learn a new skill. And I just didn't have that skill yet. And that skill was being able to trust myself around food. So once I learned that skill, the sky was the limit. Like it was so easy to just be around food and I didn't have to binge eat. It didn't even feel like I wanted to. So how do you actually build trust in yourself around food if you don't have it? Well, I want you to answer a different question to help you answer this. How do you build courage? How do you build courage? Really think about it. To build courage, you can't just wait to feel courage. You have to actually act courageous. You do courageous things, and then your courage is built. So it takes actually doing the thing, practicing the thing. The same thing goes for trust. You can't just wait to feel like, oh, I'm going to trust myself around cookies now. No, you have to go be around cookies, trust yourself, and then go from there and build. So people will avoid the foods that they don't trust themselves around. They'll keep them out of the house. They hyper control themselves. And this actually makes more of the problem. It creates more distrust. So you have to give yourself a chance to prove trust. By the way, this is one thing that this teaching number 2 is one thing that you can get away with not doing and still end binge eating. You can still stop binge eating and not do this. But if you do that, you'll end up making your life smaller and smaller because you'll have to be managing your life and controlling it. You'll be avoiding triggers. You'll be not being able to handle stress or certain emotions. You'll be scared of getting too hungry because it might lead to a binge. You won't be building the resilience to have a bigger life. So if you want a bigger life, then you're going to want to build self-trust, whatever it takes. Okay, so here's a real life example from a client I worked with who did this for herself. Her name was Marissa, okay? And she had a particular food, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, that she had thought she always had to keep out of the house. So, of course, we started working together and we broke old food rules, started giving her permission to eat more things that were a little bit like bad foods or cookies or whatever. And she started to build confidence there. And then what I had her do was, well, first of all, this is what she had done before. She had not had it in her house, but she'd end up at the end of the day Uber Eating some Ben and Jerry's anyway, so that she could binge eat it. So what we had her do is deliberately buy the Ben and Jerry's when she did her regular grocery shopping in the daytime, when she had her self-control, so that she gave herself that trust. Hey, I'm going to buy this now because I can trust myself around this food. And then what happened is she had a little bit and she was able to stop. And then 2 weeks later, I was on a call with her and we had been talking about other things. And I asked her, hey, how's the Ben and Jerry's doing? And she was like, you know what, Michelle? It's been in the freezer. I totally forgot about it. She was like, yeah, I had like a bite when I first got it, but I realized it wasn't as good as it used to be. Guys, this is what happens when you stop having so much taboo or no-nos around food. Okay, one more example here. So my client, Maggie, she was a cook. So imagine this. You are a cook. You are around food all day long and you're struggling with binge eating. You can imagine that, okay, so for her, she knew she would have to build trust in herself around food because otherwise she'd have to leave her job. So that was actually somewhat of a blessing for her. So for her, what we did is similar to the previous client. We had to start gradually building trust. We stopped limiting certain foods that were dense calorie foods. She had been following the app Noom that had tons of rules and calorie limits. She stopped following a lot of those and started building her trust in herself to just know how much was enough and be able to stop when she was done. And eventually, a big celebration moment for her was when she actually got done with work. And in the past, she had always felt like she needed to eat the food that they would have left over at the end of the day. Because for one, she had this idea that, oh my God, it's going to be bad if I waste it. And then two, she also wanted to binge eat. And so the celebration moment, the victory moment, was when she actually was able to say no to that. And she tossed the food in the trash and moved along. So there's your another example. By the way, that client, another thing really cool is that now, several months after she ended binge eating, she now has a group community where she actually teaches people who use the app Noom how to use it in a way that doesn't lead to binge eating, that is healthy and creates a healthy relationship with food. So I think that's amazing. But yeah, anyway, guys, the industry will make you think that you need someone else, that you need accountability, that you need someone on you all the time because you can't be trusted to not eat a bunch of cookies. But that is completely a lie. That is BS. You can trust yourself. You can trust your desires. You absolutely can. You just need to build that skill. Okay, we're going to move on to teaching number 3 in just a moment. All right, teaching number 3. Support. Support and sharing and connection are what break the cycle of shame. Support and sharing and connection are what break the cycle of shame. So let me remind you that I spent years trying to end binge eating on my own. Years. I didn't want help because I felt that I was supposed to be like the best at fitness and health. I also didn't want to pay for it. I also felt like it wasn't worth all of that. So many reasons. So I read books on addiction. I read books on alcoholism. I read books on healthy eating. I read about mindful eating. I even like scheduled calls with potential coaches and then didn't go, and therapists and didn't go. I kept trying to, all the different solutions I gave to you before that I tried with the same thinking as before. I went on like this for 8 years. 8 years of keeping it a secret, 8 years of wondering what was wrong with me, of feeling ashamed, embarrassed, and unworthy. I thought to myself, I shouldn't need help. And that stopped me from overcoming this problem. Okay, so it was only when it became a big enough problem outside of me and helping my clients that I actually did something about it. But I don't want that to be the case for you. It just doesn't work doing it on your own. Why? Because shame is one of the root causes of this problem. And shame inherently has to do with our relationship with other people. It can't be broken on your own. When I realized I needed help, I realized I had to act like this was a problem worth solving, worth sharing, worth talking about, worth the support. Because only by doing that could I actually show myself I didn't have to be ashamed and stop the shame. The second thing here is if you're doing it alone, you'll end up doing it in the same way you've done it before, the same pattern. It might look a little bit different, but it's really coming from the same mindset, the same place. For me, no matter what I did, it came from the same way of thinking. I needed that perspective change from someone else that wasn't coming from me. So again, the teaching here is breaking the cycle of shame requires support. It requires other people. And when I finally did that for myself, it did several things. For one, it shifted my belief in myself. I went from, I hope this will work, to this has to work because I have a bunch of skin in the game right now and someone else is relying on me. This has to work. I will make it work. Another way that it shifted my belief in myself is I went from, this is shameful, I should have it all together, I'm not worthy of help, to it's okay where I'm at. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I am worthy of help. And because of that, like I said, shame was broken and I was able to actually start moving forward. There is an enormous power of someone else joining you in and solving your problem with you. That human connection is profound. There's so much I could say about this, but I don't want to take up too much time. So again, it's the power of shifting your mindset. It's the power of shifting your belief in yourself. It's the power of that new set of eyes to change your perspective. So today I'm constantly giving myself support in many different areas of life because it always pays off. I reach out to colleagues to learn from them, whereas before I often would not do that because I was afraid of looking stupid. I was afraid of not looking as smart as them. But now I ask questions all the time. I hired a business coach so that I could increase my impact and my income instead of feeling ashamed of where I was at. And then because of that, I was able to start my own business. I hired a coach to help me with my own fitness and health and my own issues with chronic pain. Because I realized from my own perspective, despite being a health and fitness coach who helped many people overcome chronic pain, I still needed someone to help me with a new perspective for me. And that has been so helpful. So again, I'll remind you, like the coach that I worked with for binge eating, she didn't know a lot about binge eating. Not everything she did was perfect. Maybe it could have been a faster journey for me. But what did work is that she was that human connection. She gave me support. I put some skin in the game. I cared about what she thought. And she taught me some things about how the brain works. And that really helped a lot with overcoming binge eating. Okay, so one quick client story of how this worked for someone else. So my client, her name was Teresa, or is Teresa, she's still alive. Teresa is a bodybuilder. And when we met, she was actually 11% body fat. She was also a fitness coach. And if you can imagine, since she struggled with binge eating still, she had so much shame. She was absolutely obsessed with food. It consumed her life. It made her unhappy. She wasn't dating. She was staying alone when she wanted to get out of her shell. So she was like trying to be this positive role model for her clients and the people around her. But inside, she was hurting. She was ashamed. She felt like a fraud. So when she hired me, literally just the mere act of hiring me was part of breaking that cycle of shame, because she showed up and was like, hey, it's okay that I need help with this. And we just started connecting and sharing about what she was going through. And a lot of that got rid of a lot of her binge eating. And then that went along to about 2 weeks in. She did have a binge because we were still working on it. And when she did, instead of feeling like, oh my God, I'm a failure, I can't do this, from what she learned about how the mind works, we were able to actually learn from that and address the issue. And the issue had been that she had been under fueling at lunch, and she had been taking herself away from the workplace where they had donuts and extra little tasty goods because she didn't trust herself around those things. So we started building her trust there, allowing herself there. And then that also had to do with feeling ashamed of what other people would see her eating. So she started eating those foods around her work, her colleagues, and that made an enormous difference. So among other things, we started fueling her better. She actually ended up gaining a couple of pounds of muscle by the end of our time working together, just as a side effect of working on her relationship with food. And I'll tell you, 5 months later, after we stopped working together and she had ended binge eating for herself, she called me up just to tell me how wonderful everything was going. She said, I'm so much happier. I'm having fun. I'm just went on a date. I joined a new fitness community where they're not so obsessed with body image and they're just focused on having fun in the gym. I thought this was amazing. And the fact that she just wanted to call me up and tell me this, absolutely awesome. One of my favorite things about what I do. Okay, so those are the 3 teachings for today. Here's a quick recap. Number 1, there is nothing wrong with you. You don't need more discipline or willpower. You just need to understand why you're doing what you're doing. Number 2, trust can be built. Trust in yourself around food can be built. It's a skill. Number 3, support and sharing breaks the cycle of shame. And shame is inherently part of binge eating. All right, so we haven't talked yet about what behaviors, thoughts, and beliefs are keeping you stuck as an individual, or the specific things that you can do to start building your trust in yourself around food, and actually what getting support actually means for you. So that's why I am offering a free 60-minute call just for those of you who are on this call with me today. And I will help you clarify exactly what thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors are keeping you stuck fighting yourself, and help you to start making healthy choices that you're excited about and that you actually want to sustain. So again, if you're not aware of what's driving you to binge eat, it's just an endless battle of fighting yourself. You might lose some weight. You might eat perfectly for even 3 years like Karen did, but then eventually it just goes back to the same. You can ignore the problem like I did for a long time or make up for it for a while, but that's at the cost of your confidence. It's at the cost of getting out there and dating and socializing like you want. It's at the cost of feeling like a fraud and how that eats you up inside. At the cost of putting off all of the things that binge eating has been stopping you from doing and accomplishing in your life. So, in order for us to address your individual struggles, we have to talk on an individual level, just like my coach did for me. In order to get clear on exactly what you need to end your struggle with binge eating with food forever, you can actually set up a call with me today. And here's how you can actually do that. So, all you need to do is text me 2 things. 1, your name, and 2, which of these 3 teachings that I shared today spoke to you the most. Okay? And I'm going to enter my phone number in the chat and say it out loud for you. And if you don't have it, if you already have it, great. You can just text me. It's 253-273-7045. So again, text your name and which of the 3 teachings spoke to you the most. And then if you would prefer, you can also just send me an email if you like that better for whatever reason. My email is michekester@gmail.com. And I just texted it in the chat box as well. So again, what we will, once you send that text, we'll set up a time to actually have that call. And again, what we'll do on the call is we'll clarify your individual thoughts, behaviors, and beliefs that are driving you to binge in the first place. And I'll teach you how you can actually start to rewire those and break those. And that's important because without knowing those things, you'll continue trying hard, trying to control yourself, willpowering through it. And that's just not sustainable. You know it because that hasn't worked before. So that's why I'm offering this 60-minute call. I'll teach you how to end binge eating and yo-yo dieting forever. All right, so that is it for the call. Thank you again so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to talking to some of you. And yes, thank you so much for being here. So I normally do a Q&A at the end. I am so sorry I am not able to do one today because I have to jump onto a 5 o'clock call with a client. But again, I appreciate you being here. Feel free to text me a question if you have it. But also, let's set up that call so that we can get you rolling in your journey to food freedom. All right, heading out. Have a wonderful Thursday evening.